There's been a big debate recently about whether every hole without a bounds should have a drop zone. Some say yes, some say you should take it where it went out, and yet others say that it should be stroke and distance. Find out what we think and what our ideas are for some other errant throws.
3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome into this episode of HyzerCast Disc Golf Podcast. I'm here with Joanna and Lou, and thank you all for joining us, both our viewers and our listeners. We have a special thing that we announced on our last episode. We are giving away a disc once we get to 500 subscribers. There's a reason I'm showing you the back of the disc because the front is an awesome stamp that I'm not going to reveal until we get closer. So you have to subscribe, and then that will incentivize us to flip the disc around. Not yet.
Ooh, what a tease, Dave. What a tease. Tell your friends.
Because he won't even show us.
That's right. They don't even know what it looks like.
Spread the HyzerCast love.
Yes, thank you. So subscribe, and we are going to get into today's episode. We are talking about to drop zone or not to drop zone, right? So we have
that is the question.
That is the question. A couple of conversations have been had lately about what should be the protocol for both the Pro Tour or local events on what should happen when disc is thrown out of bounds. There's kind of three trains of thought that is going around. Either what it usually is wherever you go out, you take it back at the spot where it went out, and then you have 3 meters, or there's the thought that a lot of people are coming up with that there should be a drop zone on every single hole because that's kind of the way that is going to help you advance and just makes more sense, controls the round, you get to throw from where the TD wants you to, or there's the idea of getting stroke and distance. So we're going to go into that, and I think we'll start with Joanna again today. First off, let's start with, of the 3 ideas, what do you think either the Pro Tour or just PDJ should have in their rules for what you do when you go out of bounds?
Honestly, I like taking it where you were last in bounds. I think that is easy and the one that causes the least amount of questioning. Of course, you know, if you don't see where it goes out, then you have to decide together. But, you know, if there are spotters there, you know, because you mentioned Pro Tour. So, like, if we're on that level and they're going out, I think that's the easiest. Because I feel like we've all seen on coverage, like, okay, you went out of bounds, but okay, that was your first. Okay, let's look at the book. Okay, okay, so you go to the first drop zone. Okay, but then if you go out again, okay, it's the second drop. Like, there's always a discussion around that. And I thought, what is the purpose of them? Because some of them are really, really tough. And like, I mean, you could have an amazing shot and like go all the way back. Let's say you just like push distance, then you go all the way back to this drop zone that doesn't even give you a fair run at something, or like you see it on the green, or I remember, gosh, what hole is it? What tournament? Oh my gosh, where there was a drop zone and you would be putting for par. Like if you go for this, there's a hole that's like goes around, but there's like a Joanna. But you putt, but it's an unfair putt. Like literally no one can make this putt because there is a tree here. You can't go above or below. It's like kind of a raised basket. And it's like,
it's just
tough.
Penalizing.
Like,
it's just
but
penalizing
like,
at that
it's double
point.
penalizing
Right.
if you're setting up that drop zone, you're like, that's actually not fair because yeah, you went out of bounds, but to be almost double because that's impossible to make that shot. Like that's kind of not okay to me.
Yeah, that's bad placement. I think if it's the way the course is set up in just terms of what you're talking about, it's terrible design. If a TD is running an event that way, I think it's terrible play. I don't know. I think that's a terrible design.
What's that? A way a drop zone is like, where you don't have a chance to save par?
I don't even know if that's the case, but just what she's portraying, right? Like a drop zone where it's impossible and you're already going to bogey. So you are out of bounds, you're at a drop zone, you have a stroke, and now there's no way in heck just because there's a wall of tree in front of you. Like
it's like it's the risk of going for it, or you can play safe and go around. But like the distance is definitely attainable on a shot. But if it skips out, then I don't know. I
think there should be a shot to the basket. It doesn't necessarily have to be considered like, oh, can you really make this at a high percentage clip? I think the first thing it needs to be is like, is it a golf shot or is it a trick shot? What are we doing here? And it seemed like what you were describing was like they're setting you up to throw this impossible trick shot at best.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not that stinks completely.
Yeah, I think on par threes, I agree with you, Joanna, because unless you're basically putting the drop zone at 40 feet, you can't really expect anybody to be able to save par. But perhaps maybe this makes more sense on par fours or fives, where maybe you go way down out of bounds or short out of bounds, but the course designer or the tournament director really wants you still to have a chance to be able to save your par, even if you go out of bounds on some obscure place, depending on the shape of the course. So
That's a very
yeah,
forgiving TD. So on one aspect, Dave, you're speaking about like the lighter hearted, just TD, and then Joanna's just talking about like this, drill sergeant of I want perfection or nothing. Give me 18 down or 30 over.
that's right.
That's crazy.
Hey, I mean, just kidding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty much how my rounds go.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there are also it's if we talk about drop zone placement, like I really needed to like find these examples of holes because I remember watching this coverage where I think like Big Jer went out super early, but if you go out of bounds on your first shot, you go to the drop zone, and suddenly like he gained so much distance even though his disc was nowhere near where the drop zone was because he went out on his tee shot, and it was like, huh? I sat there and I thought, like, I can't believe that's the rule. Like, you could, I don't know. Maybe it's easier to throw it out of bounds and get to the drop zone and like have a better look than if you're totally stuck in the rough early from the tee. Like, not that you should try to be playing to throw out of bounds and use the drop zone to your advantage, but like, I wonder where that line is. Like, what is the benefit of them overall? I don't know, Lou. Maybe you can like weigh in on that because you're a designer and a TD, and
Yeah, it comes into a good mix of the two. Having a vision for how the hole should be played naturally is the first step. Then I like to think about some of the aspects if you're running an event and you have these OB lines here, whether they be made up or natural. I think they have their place. Do you do something where there's a drop zone? Do you do stroke or distance? Do you do or just play it where it lies? I think they all have their place in a single event. They truly do. It just has to be done right. For example, you're playing a fairway that's just nice and straight in the woods, not much challenge to it. It's a par three or a par four. And if you're 30 feet, 40 feet to the left or to the right of the center of the fairway, so we'll call it like a 60-foot fairway, there might be OB the whole way down. So they're forcing you to play straight, like accurately. There's
right.
penalty for not playing the hole to the utmost best of its design. You get too far off the fairway, that's OB. Play it where you go out would be the play and the call there. I think where you find drop zones like really useful, for example, is like if you're throwing to a completely bad area of a course where you don't want people to play from, it's not it could be marshy, it could be wet. You mark this area as OB, and if you're over there, the line of play is so bad that you don't take it from there because it's a punishing area, just hands down.
Yeah.
So creating a drop zone could give a player something on the fairway. Doesn't necessarily have to really equate to a par or a bogey setup after that. Hopefully, it's equating to some way of saving par if it's a skilled shot. Once again, it just comes down to the vision and the design of the hole. It should really make sense that, hey, you went out of bounds, but we're going to center you back up in the fairway, but you're going to bogey. Had you been over there, you could have doubled or tripled. I think
Yeah.
that's where that application lies. Now, I think the final and the third type of OB, not hazard or any of these other casual areas, but the last type of OB I could think of would be like the island green or the stroke and distance style out of bounds, and that is also strategic for some of these massive arms that are throwing 550, 600 feet. Well,
Sure.
do you leave them par threes and force them to get the threes and they don't attack, or do you make an area where that if they are running for it for that extra stroke, if they come up short, then it's stroke and distance, so they're reteeing and now they're definitely playing for bogey.
I mean,
It,
we have there are totally iconic holes like that we see. Like those are the blow up holes, and you watch. You're like, all right, hole whatever. Like you got to watch because the whole leaderboard can change right then and
Yeah.
there.
17
Yeah.
USDGC, right?
Yeah. Oh my
Absolutely.
gosh, that's like
I
iconic.
what I don't like to see for our sport is the unloading of the bag. We all carry duplicates, right? I have
Yeah.
I have 5 of
Well,
the same mold in my
maybe.
fairway driveway. Okay, my driveway. Listen to me. I have
Is that where you leave your
5.
discs?
I have 5 of the same mold in my fairway drivers, and if I throw my go-to, I don't have it. I have a backup, and then I kind of don't have a backup, and now I'm completely looking for a secondary shot. If I keep missing that island or that zone, I think missing it once should be like that stroke and distance, but then eventually, maybe for speed of play and just over, like maybe just a little too brutal, create a drop zone for the second shot. I know the Memorial used to have your tee shot. They've tried it a couple different ways. You could hit the wall, you can't hit the wall. You could drive, go OB, and have to drive again. And then they moved it to where you drive. If you go OB, they bring you to a drop zone. There's ways of
Yeah.
doing it. I think at some point you do have to let players stop just like dunking discs or just throwing them OB
Sure.
and move them over to a drop zone for speed of play in tournament. And that's where most of these calls are made. These lines aren't traditionally part of a course. No one's really necessarily looking for that course I mean, I would love to play a course that had maybe strict rules on whenever I want to go, but most of our local courses aren't designed that way.
Yeah.
But so in that tournament setting, it's just got to make sense. And I think there's an application for all 3.
Yeah, I would say also I think drop zones are essential for water carries, like missed water carries. Because why not? I think it's easier, and I think it does help speed of play because it's it's a tough one. I mean, I can think of a coverage I've watched, things I've of course I've
DDO,
played myself that I'm like,
prime
yeah,
example.
you're right. If you throw right to the water, like you should go to the drop zone because if not, you'd be like kind of close to the tee if you're just trying to hit that immediately.
Right.
Like
30 feet closer.
yeah, and it's like, what are you gonna go for that same shot again? I don't know.
Imagine that was for 18 holes. That'd be terrible. So I think if that's the case, if you didn't want to see 18 holes of that, then you shouldn't have 1 hole of that. Like I don't know why they just have these gauntlet holes where you could just literally unload your bag till you have no discs. If you keep going OB, what happens if you throw all your discs and you no longer have discs? For example, hole 17, like at USDGC, where this
I don't
endless,
know.
just you got to get it on the island. What happens when you run out of plastic? What's the call there? Forfeit?
Go to the store. Got a minute to go find another disc. Go dive in the
Ask
water.
somebody else for a
Yeah.
disc.
Yeah, but imagine you don't have a gallery with you. You're on the 4th card. You're on the 5th card.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's tough.
I
Yeah.
doubt that's ever happened.
I don't, but
I'm sure it's come
we're
close.
totally being hypothetical and exaggerating. But yeah, we've seen people go OB 5 straight, 6 straight times before. And
Sure.
once you're down 5 or 6 discs in your bag, you're creating you're using your imagination and your shot shaping abilities to try to make something work now.
Yeah.
Clearly it wasn't your go-to that was getting you there. So like
Right.
you're up the creek without a paddle at that point. And
Plan G, H,
I don't want to watch that.
Yeah.
I don't want to watch that.
Yeah, you hope to never get there.
That's my example. You don't want to do it. If you don't want to see it for 18 holes, I don't want to see it for 1 hole.
I think one of the only things that maybe a stroke and distance type thing works for is score separation, right? Because if there's a course that
Going
really
for it or
needs to, right, you make a decision. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, really the only place that I see it.
And it's a great vision at that point. That would have to be
Yeah.
the vision and the appropriate spot. So,
Right.
for sure.
So between the 3 different ways to play out of bounds, I think, Lou, you nailed it with the reason for a drop zone potentially would be like an area where you don't want players to be throwing from, get them back into the fairway. I think we kind of talked about par 4s and 5s maybe makes more sense for.
And
Par
for-
3s, it kind of makes it a difficult,
And
par save.
we may have touched on this a little bit before the show, that for our newer players that are listening and watching, stroke and distance, the term could sound a little confusing, right?
Yeah.
So what it is, you're thinking, how do you Why does that make sense? But the term comes from what you're being penalized on. You're being penalized a stroke and you're being penalized your distance. You went nowhere. So that's where the term stroke and distance comes from.
Right. It sounds like it almost should be stroke and no distance is your penalty.
Stroke and no distance is your
Right,
penalty.
right.
But
Correct.
right, it makes sense when you explain it that way. That's what's being penalized.
You're
is both
penalized for your stroke
and your
distance.
distance is you're not getting any distance move forward.
And now you know.
Now you know. So you
The
learn
more
stuff.
you know. That's why you tune in.
So shifting gears a little bit, we talked about like out of bounds throws. There's other types of errant throws like we teased in the intro where there are going
Stroke
to be
throws.
right strokes that might be added to your score depending on where you land. So hazard obviously is one of the first ones that comes to mind. Maybe the only other one obviously is out of bounds, and then there's hazard. Right now, usually the way you play it is if you land in the hazard zone, it's a stroke where you don't move anywhere. So there's no drop zones. You don't move back. You don't.
There's no rule to the lie anymore. It's just you're playing it where it
you
lies.
play
Where
where
it
you
lies.
lie, and that's exactly it. Now, there's been talks about changing that in certain instances to make maybe more open fairways a little bit more challenging. Either pockets of like a sand bunker or on the edges, playing as a hazard, and whether you have a stroke or not, forcing a standstill to play from that. Obviously, it's almost like what you'd think the stroke and distance makes sense for. It's limiting your next throw's potential distance for a lot of players. So what do you guys think about that being the new rule, moving forward? Is it landing in a hazard? Do you think you should get a stroke or not? And what do you think about having to do a standstill?
Yeah, I think for out in the open, if you're tightening up a green, for example, just roping it off, I don't think it makes like a perfect sense right there. Even the made up roped areas doesn't make much sense to me for hazard. And it's because of that. I don't know that there's much penalty other than you're just a little too far from the basket. You went just a little past it. It seems a little cheesy. You need to know it's there so you could come up short, I guess, whatever the case may be. But I like the hazard, like you were saying, and it's been brought up before, where what should be the true penalty of being in the hazard? And you're right, it should limit you distance. It should force you to a standstill only. And what does it matter if your standstill only is from 40 feet away? What does that mean?
Right.
No jump putt? Maybe that'd be interesting. Maybe having a circle 2 hazard around the basket for no stroke penalty, but it limits you to you have to stand still. You can't jump putt.
Right.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, I think that, or I think par fours is where this par fours and fives again, where there's a landing zone where you can try to go over like a sand bunker
or a green,
play up
or
short.
a green, or a golf
or
green.
golf green, right? Exactly.
We're seeing that on some of the tour,
Right.
Right.
And
exactly.
I think the golf greens we've actually been seeing are more OB. Probably now that I'm thinking about
Yeah,
it.
the sand bunkers though.
They don't want you playing from it, and the sand bunker is not ideal to play from, and
Right.
it should be an obstacle. It's a nice obstacle by the basket. You see it for what it is. It's not a skinny rope. It's clearly there, or
Right.
it's just over the crest or something. You can't go there, and you're gonna have to throw your next shot accordingly. I like that more. In terms, a sand bunker is not a natural spot by any stretch of the imagination. It's totally
Right.
man-made, but it's better than a roped area, which I think is terrible.
Always. I think any natural obstacle will outweigh any sort of line on the ground, hands down, forever and ever. And I think I don't really know how I feel about the standstill, because if you're just gonna like arbitrarily put pockets, let's say down long fairways that are wide open, like to me that doesn't really do anything. I mean,
what
sorry.
about like a well-placed sand bunker, or even if it is roped off? Let's say it's a
even the sand bunkers
four.
that are like near the baskets now, when you're on those golf courses, like I think your footing is altered a lot. I mean, sand moves. You're like, it's not even close to level. Like you're dipping down. Like here's the hill. Okay, here's the sand bunker. Whoop. Like if you're somewhere in there, like you're just trying to find your balance. I think. Like I don't think anyone's really getting a competitive advantage by being in there anyway.
Right.
Like even if you're putting, like I think you're already trying to work hard to save that.
So you think it's kind of a natural penalty, no stroke, no limit on what you can do?
I mean, you
think
can
just
be stroke, like you can get the penalty stroke, but I mean, to
but the harder
penalize
footing
them
itself is the penalty.
more, yeah, like I don't know if we can double penalize someone
Right.
because
So
you're not
here,
allowed to do that. Let's say if you whatever, like in any sense, you can't
Right,
double
you can't
penalize a
double penalize.
throw.
well, golf doesn't penalize you for being in a bunker. Joanna, you know the difference about how we use the bunker and how I think traditional golf uses their bunker system is we see more bunkers by the green than we do middle of the fairway. So I think if the rule was without penalty, by it comes back to what we were last saying was the application of the hazard and how it's laid out for a TD. I think the design of a hole with bunkers halfway down the fairway would make more sense because now, like you're saying, you want to throw a full shot, but you're in the sand and it's like more challenging. Now, whether you can run up or not, it would be the design and the placement of those sand bunkers that would make the most sense to really challenge the player. Don't just rip your drive out there. You got to watch out for the bunkers. And when you're in there, it's a crappy run up and throw to your next shot.
But if we think about the future of disc golf, I mean,
I don't
when
picture it on
someone's
a golf course.
right, like I mean, if someone's going to say, "Oh, let's design a disc golf course," no one's going to say, "Oh, great, let's put a sand pit in there." Like
Right.
we're just using that because of the facilities we need to use now to have enough space.
Right.
So like I get it. How can we make our rules fair while using honestly like suboptimal, let's say for our sports identity, like courses like but that's a very unfair thing to say because like some golf courses really are beautiful and there have been some
Right.
really great design now I think
Oh yeah,
on golf
absolutely.
courses that's not just open shot after open shot. So like but that idea of moving forward like we're not going to find sand
Right. So
on
I
a
think
like organic disc golf course.
right, that's what is on the courses that we're seeing now, but just using the element of a hazard as a course design element, I think is something, whatever that may look like. Maybe it's just wood chips. Maybe for now, it is just a spray painted circle on the ground where a lot of players land and have to make a choice, try to go over it or lay up short. I think just that thing that they can be used as a design element is maybe more what we're talking about. Because you're right, there's no sand going to be being put into a brand new course. You're not going to find sand bunkers in the woods or anywhere but a pre-built golf course.
I will tell you, in some of my design, we think of like retaining wall placement on the hills,
Sure.
and the first course that I got to do some design work on, we put that on a lot of the greens where it prevented you from sliding up the hill to the pin. You had to get it there in the air, or short 180-foot hole. Well, it's an island, and there's a towed rope and a wall. So the man-made structures, not in sand, not sand bunkers, but these nice, could be wood, could be stone, midway in the fairway by the green. These man-made structures on the disc golf course could absolutely act as hazard, but not in a penalizing literal sense to your score, but just placement. It leaves you short, doesn't let you progress, doesn't give you the best shot out, it's limiting you. Those types
Sure.
of hazards are great. And you're absolutely right. I'm never gonna design a course and be like, where am I gonna put that sand pit? No, if I'm gonna put a pit of
Right.
anything, it's gonna be a pit of water. I'm gonna have someone dig a lake for me or a pond,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, but that's what they have to do because it's a little bit of the ability to film, and it's a little bit of creating challenge for these players, and without these nuances of roped hazards, and then 20 feet behind that there's OB line. It's just this
Right.
dramatic line setups, and then you can't go in the sand, but you're going to be penalized for going in the sand, but you can also go in there. It's just all these extra challenges on a course that just might not naturally have enough. These players would be coming in shooting 19, 22 down on an 18-hole course without those ropes and sand pits.
Right, it's all about making it more difficult.
If your course is
Yeah.
too easy, get a kiddie pool, fill it with sand. Watch the pars are gonna just disappear. It's gonna be bogey fields.
That's right.
Bogey field.
Coming from the course designer himself.
Yep.
So I think we talked a little bit about the drop zones and hazards. are more so for like open style courses. But let's talk about a couple of things that apply more to wooded style courses.
Yeah.
So one thing that we've seen on a couple of courses, and I think would be good to be implemented on more courses, both locally and on the Pro Tour, is wooded fairways that have both a soft rough and a hard rough. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, let's say you have
Yeah.
a 30. I know you guys do. I'm explaining to our viewers and listeners.
Oh no, I'm
Like
agreeing with you.
a
Like
30-foot fairway, right, is no trees or just a couple trees, shot your shape, and then just outside of that, leave all the natural trees, but cut all the brush down for 10, 15, 20 feet. And then outside of that is just the natural area where if you go in that, you have nothing pretty much but a pitch out. So that would be the hard rough. So, the different layers of the rough as you go further away from the intended fairway.
Yeah, that's just good design. I mean, getting a fairway that's a defined fairway is optimal on every course that wants to be played. Too tight of a fairway, which just looks like a wall of trees. I mean, it basically is like the roughest cut, and you just feel like that you're not even on a course anymore. That's just silly. But yeah, having a nice defined fairway is great. Having a secondary cut where it's just mature trees, you'd have to shape shots or try to find something. You never know. It's a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. But then, yes, another couple feet out is just the natural lay of the land. I mean, how much are you gonna do when you're in the woods? You want to maintain your course, and eventually you got to find that line to stop maintaining and making it all prim and proper. So I think that should go into every good design for a course. And I can definitely see some of the courses I don't like, they don't have that in mind. And
yeah, I mean, look, if you throw what you think is a good shot and you land 3 feet off the fairway and you lose your disc, like
stupid. That's stupid.
that's not okay. Like
No.
that's not okay in no
Penalized
season
too hard.
of the year. Like, I mean, I know it's easy for me to say. I'm not the one out there with a weed whacker, and I'm not the one out there installing courses and maintaining them. And I understand that is such a huge lift for every volunteer and for everyone, every team of people that does that, volunteer or not. Like, it takes a village. It really does. And that's like the beauty of disc golf, that everyone pitches in and does that. But it's really something that you got to get ahead of and make sure that like it's safe to play. I mean, because no one wants to be waiting in this thick rough when your shot's really not that bad. Like, honestly,
Yeah.
like to be totally penalized like that when you're not too far off the fairway is really, it really is just unfair. And if you play it one week and then the next week that shot is perfectly visible, like, all right, like that's tough. But I love that idea. I mean, fairways are so important. Having a tough rough, like a questionable trees in the way, a bush here and there, like that's great. But nothing so thick that you're like, there's absolutely nothing anywhere.
Literally.
Yikes. Yikes.
I hate the poke and hope, or the you just feel like
Yeah.
there's no line. I love to see the disc fly. We all do. I shouldn't throw my disc and have it 40, 50 feet in flight, and I'm running 20 feet to the left to see it go somewhere, and then I'm back this way to see if it went around the next tree, and then I'm over here. Like,
you guys are moving
that
in
is the
tandem.
worst.
I scream.
That is we're part of the bobsled team. Part of the bobsled team. Here we go.
Cool runnings.
Yep.
I mean, all this being said, like I love wooded courses.
Kiss
I think
my
it's
egg.
like
No, I don't want to
courses are
kiss
the
your egg.
best. And it just breaks my heart a bit when you like get to one and you're like, oh my gosh, like it's so overgrown that you can't even play.
Do you know who would be really interesting to
No?
talk to
Not us.
about wooded courses would be Holly. So
Finley?
Oh
yeah,
yes, the
Holly
Woods
Finley.
Queen.
So yeah, she will. I don't know. I've read 20 posts in the last like 2 years from her about how she loves the wooded courses. So it's just ingrained. When I think Holly, I think wooded courses, and she's like, happier than a pig in mud. I mean, it's if we didn't have the shape of this, like if we didn't have the demand of the shape of the shot, I think it would be a little boring for me. I think for most of the players too. just even some of the way that the pros talk about the, how big open it is. It's just rip after rip after rip after rip. And as you're
Right.
putting on, it's boring. It will get old. So I would totally love to hear how Holly, like, what's her take on like the perfect wooded course? Yeah,
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of ways that, we're talking about. All this is basically different ways to make courses either harder or basically more interesting to avoid what you're talking about. Just a big, wide open, landed in the fairway, make your putt. Big spike hyzer,
Yeah.
do it again.
A big
I think
old
that's
hyzer
what-
fest.
Right, exactly. That's what all of this is about. So let us know what you think about some of these ideas, or if you have any more ideas of your own of how to make courses harder or just more interesting. But that is going to do it for us. I think this is episode 19. We're getting close to 20. Maybe on episode 20, I will show everybody the other side of this disc. For now, get ahead of the game and hit that subscribe button. Someone on our subscriber list is going to be getting this disc once we hit 500 subscribers.
I just subscribed.
Perfect. All right.
I want it.
We're almost there.
Awesome.
Lou
Thanks
might
for
get it.
finally subscribing, Lou.
Yes. We've been waiting. Thank you so much for watching and for listening. Leave us a review if you're listening on any of the platforms there. Like I said, subscribe to us if you watch on YouTube. Other than that, we'll see you on next hole.